Hello, and welcome to Day 9 of The Longing, another day beneath the earth. A fallen brother. I think we were on our way up last time. Last time we talked a bit about migraines and stroke and the similarities between those things and how that gives ideas about the brain and psychology. And I wanted to extend on that and talk about seizures and what's the word for when people... epilepsy. And I was looking into that a bit so that I would make fewer mistakes in how I talked about it. And when I was reading a little bit about that, I realized that there's similarities between migraines and epilepsy as well, and that's interesting how all this brain stuff that people don't really... I like the smell of the earth. All this brain stuff that people don't really understand very well seems to be all connected. Is very interesting. It reminds me of when I was doing some work with coding and trying to understand some code I didn't understand, and I would try and fix a bug, and I'd look at the bugs, the different bugs that were going on, and realize that they all seemed to be connected in some way. They seemed similar, and I would try and use the fact that they seemed similar as a way to figure out what the inherent problem was, and usually that was helpful. This jump is too exciting for my taste. I better wait for that stalactite to come down first. I guess that could happen in a week. But anyway, the particular thing that was most similar that I noticed between migraines and epilepsy is that they both sometimes come with auras. I talked about auras last time, and they use the same word for some people with epilepsy. They'll get an aura before they get a seizure, and it can have a lot of similar things as to what you get with a migraine. But some things I was reading, there seems to be a split on some level between some of the symptoms of stroke and epilepsy, but generally speaking, there was some similarities between all of these things. And I guess I can say, how should I talk about it? I would talk about what is epilepsy, what's the difference between that and a stroke. So if a stroke seems to be caused by a problem brought on by blood vessels getting fucked up, then in comparison, a seizure seems to be something caused by some sort of abnormal electrical stuff getting sent between the neurons in the brain. One theory being that it's almost like there's some sort of messed up feedback loop going on that causes a continual buildup of messaging in the brain until everything just goes completely off the deep end. That's not confirmed, I don't think. It's hard to say when I'm researching things for like half an hour. I'm no expert, and even if I was an expert, every possible thing you could try and look into... Oh, I'm connected back up top. Every possible thing you can look into has so much that's just... It's just so conflicting and confusing, and different experts will give you their different perspective on what they believe, and they'll say, well, this is the only way to believe this, and here's why. Read my 400-page paper. That's difficult for someone who's just trying to get a general knowledge of something. Very difficult. But where was I? The difference between them, one is about blood vessels and one is about electrical activity getting fucked up. And with a stroke, that stuff's generally permanent. The damage that gets caused by a stroke and has to be rewired. Whereas a seizure just sort of, once it's over, I guess. If you haven't banged your head against a wall by accident during the seizure, you'll probably go back to normal exactly. as far as I understand it. And something really interesting, one of the main reasons I wanted to bring up seizures before I even learned about the connection to migraines, was that I'm getting distracted by this message. I wonder how big these caves really are. One of the main reasons I wanted to bring it up was because there's a really interesting set of experiments done on people who were epileptic. These people who were epileptic were so badly epileptic that they had to have a very intense surgical procedure done on their brain that disconnects one of the major pathways between the two hemispheres of your brain. Basically, your brain has these two separate sides to it, and these two separate sides of your brain have different ways that they interact and communicate between each other. And one of the very biggest ways they communicate is, I forget the name, I looked it up and I tried to remember, but now I can't remember. One of the biggest ways they communicate is through this very specific part, sort of in the center from what I could see. And if the whole idea of a seizure is that there's these electrical signals being sent back and forth and sort of circular building up, then the idea of this procedure to try and fix this was to disconnect one of the main places that they could get amplified and go between and just loop over and over again. So they try and just cut these spots in between the brain, specifically this one spot, and apparently that often would reduce seizures. And it also could cause some very interesting other things when you start fucking around and cutting pieces of the brain. And they started to learn about things like alien hand, which is the name of this phenomenon that some people get who had that done to them, where one of their hands will just do things sometimes without their conscious thought behind it. Their hand will just do things, and they won't know why. And sometimes they literally have to use their other hand to restrain the one hand so that it can't fuck around. It is really creepy and weird. But in addition to alien hand, there were some more intense, more interesting studies done about visual information going into the brain in these split brain people. And it's important to note that people who've had their brain split like this, there are still ways that information travels between the two sides of their brain. I think I've already been here. There are still ways that it travels between the different sides of their brain, but the main one has been cut. And in these people, one thing that you have to understand is that when you look at an image, the visual data coming into your brain ends up being split between the two sides of your brain. So the visual data from one side of your field of vision will end up going to one side of your brain, and the other side of your field of vision will go to the other side of your brain. And in these people with the split brain, you could flash an image on one side of their field of view or a different side of their field of view, and depending on which side of their vision that you flash the image, they'd perceive different things because different sides of their brain process information differently. So for instance, if you were to send visual information on one side that was associated with language, then they'd be able to describe what they saw. But if you sent that same image to the other side of their brain and you asked them, "What did we show you?" they'd say, I didn't see anything. Because the side of their brain that could actually verbalize what they saw is disconnected from the side of their brain that saw the image. And then if you ask them to draw an image, that same person who told you I didn't see anything, they would then draw exactly what was shown to them. And if you ask them, why did you draw a key or whatever you showed them? And they'd say, oh, I don't know, maybe because I was looking for my keys this morning or something. And so why can I not get down these stairs? It will not let me come down here. Please let me walk down. No. What is up with this? It's fate telling me I can't go down these stairs today. Alright. So they'd come up with a story as to why they drew what they did. They basically lie and believe it. It's really creepy stuff. I've already been here. This is where it just came. Just absolutely really cool stuff to learn about. Definitely should check that out from someone who knows what they're talking about better than I do. I think the studies that go into this kind of thing, they go much further than this as far as I understand it, but this is what I understand confidently enough to at least tell people about a little bit. Later today, I'm looking forward to... I've got a friend I haven't talked to in a very long time, a very famous friend that everyone knows about. Everyone on the planet has heard of this man. Sometimes I want to stop walking and just sit down and think. Alright, let's do that. Let's just let ourselves sit and think. I'm very much looking forward to having an interview. I think everyone's going to love this fantastic interview with this very famous man that everyone knows and loves. Good friend of mine I haven't talked to in years. Should happen later today. I don't know if it's been 10 minutes. It probably has. I usually underestimate the amount of time I've spent talking and walking. I really wanted to talk about all this stuff about split brains and the nature of consciousness and all of that, because I wanted to talk about some of the fucked up ways I perceive the world and the ways I sort of understand things and think and feel. A lot of the time people they think that the way that they see and believe and understand and perceive the world around them must be the way that everybody does. But when you look into it a little bit, it tends to be just the opposite. People perceive the world in extremely different and interesting ways. And I don't just mean everybody's a special snowflake, but literally your brain is wired differently to see the world differently. And it's incredibly fascinating. I think I've used the word fascinating a million times already. I'll try and come up with different words to use so it gets less annoying. Let's see if it's been 10 minutes. It probably has. I'm going to end the episode if it has.